My name is James Ponti, and I am the author of middle grade series such as City Spies, The Sherlock Society, and Framed. And today I am here with one of my favorite authors and a dear friend, middle grade author. Pam Muñoz Ryan has written such amazing books as Esperanza Rising, um, Manana Land. She has, I think, maybe the best covers, other than I love my covers, the best covers of anyone. You see that image all over the place. And she has a great new book out. Pam, say hi to everyone. Show us your new book.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. And my new book is called El Nino. And yes, it is about El Nino, the weather effect, and it is also about a boy. And so, yeah, I'm very excited. It just published in May, so it's still new, and I'm very excited about it. And in a nutshell, it is about a mythological world and a real world that collide.
It's funny. I specifically remember we were, I think, at a specifically now. I think we were at a conference, and you told me the idea for this book. It's probably a year and a half ago, and I was just amazed. That sounds like the best idea. And then part of me was even a little sad. It's like I could never have that idea. So I am so glad that Pam Ryan is having these ideas that blend um, magic and reality. And I don't know if magic's the right word, but
Yeah,
yeah,
to a certain degree,
yeah,
yes.
these, it's just so Pam. And that's why when I was putting together this idea, so I've been working on, well, I was working on the Sherlock Society Hurricane Heist, my new book. Um, I break down the different phases, and I thought, which friends could I talk to that could talk about the different aspects of writing? So we've talked about setting and plot. And with Pam, I gave her the really unfair task of let's talk about the craft of writing, which sounds very highfalutin and it sounds very artistic. But I just love your use of words, your telling of stories. So it just seemed like the thing to do. So with that very long preamble, to you, what does craft mean when people talk about the craft of writing?
Well, I think that I mean, what it means to me is not anything very glamorous or highfalutin or even exotic. To me, it's just the techniques that you use to cobble together a story that a writer would use to put together a story that's compelling, interesting. Um, it's like characterization, it's voice, it's which voice you use, what I tell you about my characters, what I don't tell you about my characters. So all of these elements and language embellishments like similes and metaphors, comparisons, um, things like creating tension and cliffhangers. It's all of those things and how we use all of those things to put together the puzzle of our story.
Now, I when I get stuck with an idea, or when I'm starting a new book, especially, but even when I'm starting a chapter, I will do this thing sometimes where it's like stretching before a basketball game, where I'm trying to get the muscles good, and I will pluck 10 books off the shelf. And I have a bookcase just of books written by friends. So I usually put 10 books off of there, and I just read aloud the opening paragraph of each book. And by hearing everyone's word choice, I don't want to mimic anyone or copy anyone. Oh, what a great way to start. Oh, what a great use of words. I love the way you start stories. So I'm just gonna read the opening of Esperanza Rising. If Do I have your permission to do that? It's not a
Sure, of
copyright
course.
infringement just to read one line, right? Um, our land is alive, Esperanza, said Papa, taking her small hand as they walked through the gentle slopes of the vineyard. So we talk about craft. There is craft on display. In
Oh,
so much of craft to me is about minimizing the number of words you use. How do you and in not so many words, we know about Esperanza. We know she has a relationship her with Papa. We know that about her size, about the location. How long do you spend writing the openings? How long do you spend coming up with that? Because that's really when the voice is introduced, because the voice is different in every book.
yeah. Well, I have to say that the openings get rewritten hundreds and hundreds of times because this goes to one of your other questions, which was what's my writing process. So I think I'll talk about that now.
Yeah.
I'm a recursive writer. And so I know that I have friends who are writers that are very, like they have a big bulletin board, they have little cards, they put things on the bulletin board, they block out before they ever start writing. I'm more of I'm the type of writer that starts in a scene. And it's very interesting to me that it's almost exactly that scene almost never changes through, through the whole all of my books. It's always that same scene. I start in that scene and I write, and the next day I sit down and I go back to the beginning and I reread what I wrote the day before. I edit and I add more text. And the next day I go back to the beginning and I reread and I rewrite and I add more text and I do that over and over and over again until it becomes too unwieldy to go back. Maybe I'm 3 or 4 chapters in, I'll just go back maybe 2 or 3 chapters and start. But I'm a very recursive writer in that I'm always going back, rereading, read that opening scene probably gets written more than any other scene in the entire book because I have reread it, rewritten it, and edited it so many times. So
And
I tell students, I'm not really a writer, I'm a rewriter because for me, it's all rewriting.
so I'm gonna do an admission here.
You're the one of
I
the people that puts the cards
No,
on
I
the
never heard
board.
that term before. And
Oh, recursive?
that's exactly how I write. And I didn't think anyone else did that.
Yeah.
So
I
recursive, because I go back and
No, an English teacher told me that. An English teacher said to
I
me,
never knew that term.
I explained it at an English at a National Council of Teachers of English conference once, and a teacher came up to me and she said, "You know what that's called? That's called recursive writing." And I said, "No, I've never
Because
heard that."
she's trying to protect me here, which is, I come
No,
from a
I
publishing background, so I never learned like book writing in a formal thing. I kind of have figured it out as I went. And for some reason, that's the way I used to edit TV shows. I would constantly go back to the beginning and rewatch and add and go back and rewatch.
yeah, yeah.
And that's the way I write books. And so I will have written my first chapter of a book maybe 30 times, it feels like.
Oh,
And,
absolutely.
and I will
Yeah.
have written the last chapter maybe once because it's so overdue that when I get to the end, I think we'll get it in rewrites. We'll fix it in after my
Well,
editor looks at it. But yeah, I constantly do that. And it took a while for me to get to the point where, like, if I am on chapter 15, I'll go back to like 12. I
right,
used to go,
exactly. It's exactly what I do.
yeah,
Yeah,
and it's like, and then I kind of now have fallen into this habit where Saturday morning I'll start at like 7 o'clock when the house is still pretty quiet, and I'll reread the whole book from start to where I am
absolutely.
for that once a
Yeah,
week reminder of,
yeah.
because then you might see, oh, I didn't know I was heading to this spot.
Or I
And
might want to pull this
it
thread
helps
a
me.
little.
Yeah, and I sometimes have these images in my head of paint or of frosting a cake, which is funny because I've literally never frosted the cake, but where I'm trying to make it smooth. It's like,
Well, here's the other thing. I know that for whatever reason, I start in an opening scene. I know the emotional resolution that I want in the ending of the book. I have no clue how I'm going to get from that opening scene to this emotional resolution. All that in between, that's really the day in, day out, hard work part of
it makes me
of
feel
it.
so much better to know that you write the same way. I
Oh
I I
yeah.
I
And
thought
you know
that it
what?
was.
Here's the thing. Teachers sometimes really want to hear us say, oh, that we have a detailed outline, that okay, here's the thing. I know how to outline. You know how to outline. Sometimes I get in the middle of a story and I get a little stuck. I make a list of things that should or could happen. That's an exercise. That's a tool I have in my toolbox. Outlining is a tool I have in my toolbox. Should I need it? It's an outline. You have that tool in your toolbox,
And I don't use it hardly
and
ever. Right.
students need to have that tool in their toolbox because, well, I mean, making a list of things that should or could happen, it's a type of outline.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm just saying all those things that you learn when you're in school, in your language arts class, your English classes, whatever, those are all tools to have in your toolbox, and you may or may not use them someday, but boy, when you need them, it's really nice
That's
to be
right.
able to pull them out. Yeah.
Literally today, I'm right now I am writing Sherlock Society 3, and last night at midnight, I was frustrated with the scene, not a lot of progress. And what I did, because I don't outline. I thought for this book I would try to do like more of an outline before I got started. And by the third chapter, I had deviated from it so far, I realized, well, I'll just use this as a reference of possible things because it's no longer an outline.
Yeah,
But I went down and I did exactly what you just said. For this chapter, I wrote 10 things that I know needed to happen in the chapter. So it's like an outline just for the chapter. And then I was able to, because I want it to flow better. You mentioned voice earlier, and I think for me in my writing, voice is one of the most important things to me. Identifying the voice of a book, um, identifying the voice of the character. Are those the same thing? Am I telling it in first person, third person? All these elements of tone and all like that. But I write series, so once I have a voice, it usually is I'm in pretty decent shape for a while. You're writing these, you're starting fresh every time on your
yeah,
books.
much standalone. Yeah.
Does your voice change much from book to book, or is it always partially your personal voice?
I don't really know how to answer that except to say that when I start in that scene, whatever scene it is that I'm beginning in, and especially if my character is going to talk in that scene in some way, shape, or form, usually that voice comes to me. Um, for instance, I only have a few books that I've written in first person, and in those books, the voice came to me like when I was writing that opening scene. That's how the voice came to me as the character saying, "I did this"
Right,
or whatever, Um, and so, but most of the time I do write in third person, you know, and but through the lens of one character, the main character. So I'm not sure quite how to answer that. I mean, that's
right,
also tied into dialogue and the way of talking that we give each character. Sometimes our characters you can use certain words that maybe our character says "oh" a lot, or maybe our character says "well," or maybe our character um, lets the G drop off of the ending of words with ing. Maybe there is a certain, I try, sometimes you can give certain characters certain little tweaks to the way that they talk that helps the reader know, oh yeah, I know exactly who's talking, even if you don't tell me, right?
right, right,
So little things like that really are helpful. And as far as the tone and the voice of the book, that usually comes to me in that first scene. I usually already it's usually something that's really almost inherent to the idea.
right,
Yeah,
right. That totally makes sense to me. That's you know, so the first series I wrote was called Dead City, and the next series I wrote was called Framed, and Dead City was told in first person by the main character, Molly, and Framed is told in first person by the main character, Florian. And my wife is my first reader always, and so I've written a couple chapters, and I showed it to Denise, the frame first, and she goes, I really like it, but it really sounds like you just took Molly and said she's a boy now. And I didn't
uh,
real and that I didn't get anything written for 2 or 3 months because and for a while I wrote it in third person and to realize, okay, you because those are the only books I had written. That was the voice I thought I wrote in, and I realized no, that was Molly's voice. And so now I need another one. And so now what I found with the Sherlock Society and with City Spies is that because I'm doing two a year, which in some ways is ridiculous and was not a smart planning thing on my part. But what's good is City Spies is told in third person and it focuses on a different protagonist in each book.
right.
And Sherlock Society is told in first person. And so the voices of the books are so different that I'm able to make that adjustment.
Right.
I usually turn in a book. The way I try to do it is I turn in the book, I go on the book tour, and when I come back, I start the next book in the other series. And so I've had like 2 weeks of or a week or two of not writing, but doing that switch, and then the voice you mentioned, I thought was great that how you talked about the way certain characters talk. I think people are often curious how you and I aren't young in the way that our characters are young. We're not 12 or
Right.
13. Right. Our personal children are grown. You have grandkids around. But how do you write? How do you get that dialogue right in your characters? Do you have a
Well,
trick to that?
well, I, well, first of all, I will have readers and I'll have young readers that will, like, and first of all, I lived, with a house full of kids, obviously. I
Right.
mean, I had four kids and I had boys that were for instance, in El Nino, it's a 13-year-old boy and it's about a subject matter that I knew a lot about surfing and swimming and I had a house full of boys who did all of those things and who taught surfing and we lived near the beach and so the whole culture I was familiar with. And, of course, just like many writers, I listen. If I'm writing about a certain age and I'm around kids of that age, or, um, I try to pay attention to how they talk. Um, and then like when I have somebody read it, like I've had young people read my books before they come out and they might say, hey, we wouldn't say that. We wouldn't say it like that. And so I might change something here and there just to make it a little more believable.
I think a thing that I feel like you do, I feel like all good kids writers do, hopefully I do, that's also really important in that is that you really respect kids. And so the things I hate to read and I hate to watch, when I was younger, there'd be these movies about kids that obviously been made by no one, people who'd never seen a kid, because they didn't talk the way any kids talk. They didn't respect the kid culture. They just kind of dumbed down adult culture. And like I said, surf culture is a very specific thing. I grew up at a beach too, and it is a very specific culture that matters so much to the people that are in it. Um, one more thing I want to get to before we wrap up is a routine. So do you have, because I think that's a thing that when we're in school learning writing, we just write when we get the chance in between dinner and homework or this and that. Do you have a routine and how does your routine help you? Or are you a random access writer?
Oh no, this is a job. This is my job. And um, I like to tell right I like to tell adults who are aspiring children's book writers, and I like to tell students that momentum is far more important than inspiration. The physical act of sitting down and revisiting your manuscript day after day after day after day, or week after week after week, or month after month, that's for me where real inspiration resides, is in during, within the momentum. Um, I'm not one of those people that just gets this like an idea and it just comes to me and I quickly over a 3-week period of time block out an entire book or rough draft out. That doesn't happen for me. um, for me the crux of the book is that what becomes the ultimate idea for the book is a confluence of rivers. It's this story coming from over here and this idea coming over from here and everything sort of coming together in the middle. Um, I just revisit my manuscript and I really approach this as a job. I like to tell students because people ask me, and I'm sure they ask you, well, what do you do when you don't feel like writing? You write.
Yeah, you said it awesome.
It would be like saying to your teacher, well, what do you do when you don't feel like teaching? Do you just stay home and do nothing? No, you show up and go to work. And
Or
I think for me,
right.
that's how I approach this. I show up and go to work, whether I feel like it or I don't feel like it. And so I think that's, um, what I find in revisiting the manuscript. To me, that's where all my creativity comes from. And I mean, sure, some days it's better than other days, but the momentum of going back and revisiting and rereading and inching the story forward is probably, you know, for me, it's what gets me from point A to
Yeah,
point B, right?
absolutely.
And I
It,
don't, my routine, I mean, I'm a morning person. I mean, if you talk to a bunch of different writers, you hear a lot of different, it's very idiosyncratic in that some people, they start at 10 o'clock at night and write till 3 in the morning. I would be crying at that point. I'm just an early person and I get up early and I write early. Um, and so I just know that that's where my best, you know, um, my best writing comes from is during that time of day. So, I figured that out and I play on that.
The first 9 books that I wrote, is that right? No, no. Yeah, the first 9 I wrote that way because I had a main job
Yeah,
and kids and so I would write at night on the weekends. And I remember telling my wife, I go, imagine what it'll be like if I ever so I am so
and
happy
look
at
what happened,
7
right?
a.m. to be able to
Yeah,
write. I am so
yeah,
happy that,
yeah,
I'm sitting here during the day and it's light out and I'm rested. I'm not trying
yeah,
to drink like,
right.
sweet tea to keep up,
Uh,
stay up and keep working. But yeah, it is a job, and it's funny
I
because
mean,
you talk about momentum for recursive writing, a term I'll now use all the time. Momentum's everything. That's why I rebuild, rewrite,
right,
reread, because I'm trying to build the momentum of the story
right,
because
right.
that's what swept me along as a reader or a viewer of stories is the momentum of it. You can't put it down. So, all right, let's
Well,
wrap up
here,
with some clues. Since it's Sherlock, we're doing clues, not
okay.
quiz. Do you have any clues for craft for young or not so young aspiring writers? Or even established writers such as myself, always looking to get better?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I first of all, to adult writers who are aspiring children's book writer, to adults who are aspiring children's book writings, I would say study the craft of writing at more than you study the business of publishing, because the craft of writing is going to serve you really well. And what I mean by that is, I mean, um, you know, practice writing all different types of genre. You know, give yourself exercises, or take a writing course, or try to write a memoir. Or the other thing I would really love to tell adults and students is, if you don't write poetry or you don't read poetry, try reading poetry and try writing poetry. It will influence all of your writing in a really profound and different way. Um, so I would say don't put yourself in a box. Like, read a lot of different genres, write, even if it's just for an exercise and or a paragraph, a lot of different types of things, nonfiction, fantasy, poetry, magical realism. And so I would just say that sort of, I'm trying to always make my brain work in a way that's different than I do every single day.
Right. That's great.
Um,
That's great. I do. I'm a big fan of reading aloud, and so I can
right.
hear it.
I do the
That
same.
helps me so much.
Read it
Um, I,
aloud.
I do it.
Mhm.
I don't know anyone else. I'm sure others do this, but I do it intentionally. The way I do a crossword puzzle first thing in the morning. I do a crossword puzzle last thing before I go to bed because I want
Uh,
to play with words and expand my vocabulary
oh yeah,
and
yeah.
just flex those muscles in my
I
brain.
get the first thing every morning. I do spelling bee until I get queen bee. I do the Wordle. I do, the crossword, and it's just like a mental exercise to kind of get me
Absolutely, it
going.
helps so much.
And yeah, I would say also, um, as a writer, when I approach a manuscript, my most ardent goal, because I don't sit down and say to myself, okay, what elements of the craft of writing can I do
Ever.
today?
Yeah.
Ever. I never sit down and do that. I have those things in my subconscious somewhere or in my toolbox. Um, I do sit down and write with one intention, and that is making the reader want to turn the page.
Yeah, and we do. We read your stuff and we want to. And a thing that I do because we never think of craft that way. You never sit down and think about. I need
No,
some good
yeah,
similes here. I need some
yeah.
symbolism. I look at other things like I'll look at a building that I love. And I'm like, what is it special about this versus every other building? Because I don't know architecture. Oh, it's because they did this. And then I'll try to think of, is there a writing
Remind me of, yeah.
is there a writing thing that would do the same thing? Is there where people break convention, is there equivalent? So always looking for inspiration outside, but
Right.
well,
And
thank you so.
sometimes,
Oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
Oh no. The other thing I would say is, if you feel like you're getting stuck, is to try to write your story in a different person. If you've been writing in third person, try taking just a chapter and writing it in first person to see um,
If
if you
that's how it
like
was
it
meant to
better.
be?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely the case. Well, Thank you so much, Pam. I
Of
truly appreciate
course.
you taking the time. Hold up that book again. I want everyone to see
Ah,
it. El
here.
Nino, amazing.
Oh,
Um,
wait.
oh,
And
and either the Sherlock books, and but to all of you out there that want to be writers, Pam and I can both tell you, it certainly has been a fun life for me. Pam,
oh,
recommend it.
absolutely. Well, of course, I mean, I will say it's a job.
It's a
It's
job,
work,
and
but
it's not always
it
an easy job, but
not
it
always an
is.
easy job, but it's a fun job.
But you are usually surrounded by wonderful people, and that part is
Yeah.
really pretty great. Everyone have a great day, and thanks so much for joining us.